Thank you everyone for joining us for our annual meeting. Tom Green has just started his remarks and I think he'll be right back. Hi, Tom, can you hear us?
Yes, apologies. I seem to have had some technical difficulties.
It happens. Thanks so much for coming back.
Yep, no worries. So I'm just going to go right in. I apologize that I was interrupted during the blessing. You all may consider yourselves and this discussion blessed. So the Muddy River is one of a myriad of waterways that the Pawtucket and the Ponkapoag bands of Massachusetts would have utilized to get from place to place. Different family bands in the area of the Muddy would have had machoons lining the banks. Machoons, just like the one burned out last fall at the Little Mystic Boat Ramp, a project of cultural reclamation meant to bring attention to the importance of the communal waterways in and around Boston, used for tribal and intertribal exchange for over a millennia. This project marked the first time in almost 400 years the Massachusetts have been able to burn out a machoon within Boston city limits. As we were cut off from these rivers and the harbor early during colonization. To be able to work in the way of my ancestors and carry on the tradition was one of the most meaningful times of my life. To launch that machoon into the Mystic River, which connects to the Charles, which connects to the Muddy River, which leads me here to share the importance of that experience with you all, is a great example of how the waterways in and around Boston are still bringing people together. These waters carried foodstuffs and trade goods to and from all of the indigenous communities along its banks. They carried the indigenous Massachusetts to visit family and friends in communities too far to travel on foot. The Muddy River connects to the Quinnipiac or Charles River, which again connects to the Mystic. These waterways and the smaller rivers whose waters flow far from their sources would carry important delegations to make and maintain alliances with neighboring tribes. It's likely the Muddy River would have been teeming with ample amounts of fish. Fish harvested with nets made of cordage from milkweed that grew right along the rivers themselves. Fish was also harvested with the assistance of fish weirs that are still being found during construction in Boston. All of the time, these fish would have been eaten, smoked to preserve, and the heads and guts were interred into the planting fields to nourish the soil. Today, people are wary of the Muddy and other local rivers overflowing. 400 years ago, this would have been a welcome blessing, as the water would add mineral deposits to the soil for improved agriculture. When it wasn't overflowing, the rich mud would have been dredged and harvested from the river to fertilize the planting fields each family band owned and maintained. The Massachusett Band of Neponset, Totant, Shawmut, Mishawam, Quanahasset, just to name a few, were almost immediately cut off from these waterways by the English. The English were fearful of the Massachusetts. They did their best to keep the different bands of Neponset and Pawtucket divided. Keeping us from our waterways was one method to isolate the different bands from each other, from information about each other's welfare, from information of the ongoing threat from indigenous peoples outside of the Massachusetts sachem-ship, from receiving aid from each other in times of need. A law was even implemented in 1675 forbidding all Massachusetts from entering Boston unless they were being escorted by an English musketeer. And if caught on the wrong side of this law, any indigenous person could be hung by the neck until they were dead. This law was not repealed until 2004. It was very important to the English colonists to control the harbor and all of the waters that flowed to it. It gave them the upper hand when moving themselves and goods into areas not accessible to them by other means. The indigenous regard these waters as sanctioned entities, caregivers, protectors, and providers. The colonial view of these waters reduces them to commodities to be manipulated against their natural ways. We need to return to respecting our waters. We need to stop taking advantage of the life force they share with us. We need to do more of what we are doing here by recognizing the immense importance of our waterways. We need to implement ancient indigenous ways of living responsibly and sustainably into local school curriculum. There is a collective need for us to gain more knowledge about the Muddy River and other rivers in Boston so we can become better stewards of these amazing places that we borrow from the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's
Thank you,
wonderful.
Tom.
Great. So, and Nika, should I go back to sharing? It was great to hear from Tom. I wanted to briefly mention the sponsors that made this evening possible. Caroline, the Caroline Laughlin Fund, Wilmington Trust, member of the M&T family, and Longwood Collective, who many of you may know of as Masco before and has a new name. And so we really appreciate everyone that makes this evening possible. I also want to thank our public partners, the City of Boston Parks and Recreation, the Brookline Department of Public Works, and DCR, that's Department of Conservation and Recreation for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I know we had some folks sign up. I think many of them are already here. That's Erin Galantine, Alexandria Vecchio, Tom Brady, Josh Altador and those are folks from Brookline, from the City of Boston, Josh Altador, Chris Osgood, Caitlin Stapleton, and Joe Pellegrino, and of course one of our presenters tonight, Kate England, and also Gina Johnson from DCR, and I'm sure there are others may have also joined. I want to say thank you so much for making the time to be here. Your partnership is everything to the work that we do. Wanted to also thank our board and the board of directors that help steward this organization and make this work with all of their support and your support. And we have some new board members that have joined just this last year. I wanted to particularly acknowledge them as this is an annual meeting. Pam Beal, Carolyn Bunch, Jen Goldberg, and Stephen Gray all just joined in the last year. So thank you so much. And a special thank you to Ben Taylor for many years of board service and chairmanship. We can only do this work with the volunteers and the supporters that the Conservancy is blessed to have. All of you that give your time, your effort, make donations. As a nonprofit, we are really extremely grateful to have the network of supporters that we have. And this is a list of our park advisors and the board of park advisors. And we had a couple new members also join the board of park advisors this year. That's the Authentic Caribbean Foundation and also the Muddy River Initiative. We've highlighted those, but this is a really wonderful network of organizations up and down the Emerald Necklace that help inform our work and help steward the efforts and the initiatives of our projects along with the board of directors and our staff. I think a few elected officials might be able to join us this evening. I wanted to especially thank those that help both respond to our requests to constantly consider additional parks funding for both our public partners, but also projects that we might be helming, the volunteers, the Committee of Neighborhoods, which is a major new group that the Conservancy was very happy to help steward and bring to life with the Olmsted Now effort of the last year. Our foundation, corporate individual and government supporters that make this happen. And of course, our staff. I wanted to briefly mention a city councilor who has meant a lot to this river in particular, who is making a new exciting step in her career and is not going to be city councilor for too much longer. But many of you may know Councilor Kenzie Bach. She's headed to head up the Boston Housing Authority, and we're super excited for that. Of course, we are also going to miss her. She has been, she's not able to be here tonight because, of course, she's like this helping with another organization's online annual meeting. But she knows that we are bidding her thank you. We talked to her last night. She has been instrumental in so many projects to improve the Fenway, Kenmore, and Back Bay neighborhoods. She's been a fierce advocate for the Charles Gate Innovation Project and also supporting the Muddy River Restoration, which we're going to hear about tonight. And she and others really helped make sure that additional funding was added to the project to do more of the invasive removal, to complete the Phragmites removal, which was really an important thing. And it was not easy. And we really appreciate, Councilor Bach's leadership on that. And we of course wish her well in her new role, and all the city councilors have meant so much to the necklace, but as we talk about the river tonight, we wanted to give a special thank you to her as she's going to be moving on, but I'm sure we'll still find ways to work with her, hopefully. So I wanted to briefly do an overview of what we do and who we are. The Emerald Necklace Conservancy works hand in hand with our public partners to help steward the 1,100 acres of linear parks that run through Boston and Brookline, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in 1870 until 1890, a 5-mile linear system. The portion that we particularly focus on is the portion designed by Olmsted. And that is from Charles Gate Park, which is here on the far right of the screen, to Franklin Park. And, this makes up roughly half of all of Boston's parkland. So I think it's really interesting to understand sort of the value and the significance of this amount of public land within the city limits of Boston. And that includes meadows, woodlands, waterways, paths, the river, and of course, numerous playgrounds, ball fields, and other kinds of more formal active recreation facilities. Excuse me. Olmsted believed that the Emerald Necklace was his most important work. He talked about how the Boston Emerald Necklace work should come before all others. He really prized, I think, the way that it was connected so many neighborhoods and was a linear system and functioned as the first piece of green infrastructure that has ever really been designed in this way, in this type of tradition. And it makes our city more livable through the water management and other things that it does for us. And we're going to talk more about that this evening. So I'm not going to go into that more because others will and do it better. So want to show you also a view of the necklace north-south, which is actually the alignment of the planet, and show you how the neighborhoods line up and how the Emerald Necklace parks fall. And you can see how it links so many neighborhoods, and of course has the opportunity to link even more as we think about future investments. And I wanted to touch on some of the highlights of our work over the last year. We talk a lot about our work into a few categories, so I'm going to use those as a framework. We talk about parks, people, and policy. And, we know that all these things are related, but we also know that so many of the pieces of work that we do can benefit all of these different areas. And many of you make this possible. Our work is supported 100% by donations. and foundations, individuals, and corporations. And this is really work that I hope all of you feel proud to be part of. So please let us know if you have questions or feedback as we go along. We'll have some opportunity for questions and answers. So one of the main items, of course, of our park work has been the work that we've been doing over the last several years, but particularly in the last year with the Olmsted Tree Society. It's a program that's been in place since 2013. It's a strong partnership with the City of Boston, the Town of Brookline, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts DCR. All three of those organizations, those jurisdictions, manage parts of the necklace, and we match dollar for dollar their work in the park, and have together now completed the stewardship of over 9,000 of the trees, and we're continuing to build on that and make improvements. So the next round of work that we'll be doing will be even more valuable for the trees that we steward. Here is the water truck that we are extremely happy and proud to have. This has allowed us to do a lot of the early tree care that is sometimes very difficult to do. And this is a year-round program that our tree care, and you're going to start to see this summer, our water truck is actually going to start rolling again tomorrow, thanks to Jack, as we are planting some trees in the Back Bay Fens, the Victory Garden area, and getting the water truck going again for this season. We know that it is particularly hard for the baby trees to get established, and this is something that really continues to help. So that's one of the major accomplishments of this year. We've completed a full year of watering, and we're going to be starting another one. We used to use more outside contracted water, but we found this to be a lot more affordable. These trees and the value that the parks provide shade and reduces the heat effect of our cities, and provides numerous other benefits both to the air, absorbing stormwater. These are all the kind of benefits that that we get that we sometimes aren't 100% aware of. And so by taking care of the trees, we can ensure they can do that more for us over the long run. This is something that's going to be gone into a little bit more, and I think we're seeing some of Charter's equipment here in these images as the waterway conservation work has been happening, and that is through the Army Corps of Engineers in a very close partnership with DCR, Brookline, and Boston, and the public partners, with the support of many others, as we try and make sure that the Muddy River can provide the important flood capacity and hold the water that is needed. As we know, there are going to be more and more increased storm events over the coming years with climate change. Many of you may know that the Emerald Necklace was founded as resulting from floods in 1996. I joke sometimes that we had a water birth, but it is what led to our founding. So we are very connected, all of us, of course, to the water. Thank you again, Tom, for helping us think about that in newer and deeper ways for many of us. But also it is what led to the founding of this organization. So this talks a little bit about how much stormwater the Muddy River manages. And there have been 2 phases of the project, and there's more to see on that if you would like to see the overall work of the Muddy River Restoration Project that I know that Bob is going to talk a little bit about tonight. But there is also a website, the MMOC Muddy River Oversight Committee website, and you can learn more about the project there. There have been 2 phases of the Muddy River restoration. One, which daylit a portion of the park in front of what had been the Sears building, now the Landmark Center. And then now I guess it's 401 Park. I feel like it's gone through a couple of names. And now we call it Justine Mealiff Park in the middle of, between the Back Bay Fens and the Riverway. and also the phase 2 project, which is now underway and nearing major milestones. Another big piece of the work that we do as the Emerald Necklace Conservancy is work with many of you who literally roll up your sleeves and come out to help us, pick up trash, rake leaves, remove invasive plants. Sometimes we even get lucky enough to plant new native plants in their place. And these are all wonderful projects that many of you volunteers help us do. Many of you may have been out just this last weekend at the Muddy River cleanup when we had over 400 volunteers out and about. One of the partnerships I wanted to really bring attention to and say thank you, the City of Boston with Kinsey Bach's leadership and partnership over the last couple of years have developed a great program called Power Corps. And it's a program for green jobs and training, leading young people in Boston into those types of jobs. And it's been a wonderful year with the Power Corps team that's been working throughout the Emerald Necklace and in many other places in Boston. But that's been a big part of some of the success this year. And I wanted to thank the City of Boston and others for leading in that initiative. A major project in the Emerald Necklace Conservancy's world has been the continued advocacy and moving forward with the Charles Gate Park Revitalization Project. Many of you may know Charles Gate Park really was the first piece of the Emerald Necklace designed by Olmsted, but it has been really changed, really negatively impacted with a lot of changes over time, new roadways, connections cut and lost. But the good news is that we have over the last year secured and gotten confirmation in the state and city's capital plans for over $190 million of investment to come from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Transportation to improve 2 of the bridges in the area and do other important environmental improvements, such as the reopening of the last 250 feet of the Muddy River, and also adding bike and pedestrian connections. So for the first time in 70 years, you will be able to, again, bike or walk or swim if you're a fish. Let me just make that clear. We're not recommending people swim in the river yet, from the Muddy River to the Charles River. This is not just a local improvement, but it's really a regional connection, because we know that the Esplanade is a wonderful park system that stretches miles from other cities, other towns through Boston. And so we know that by remaking these regional connections, we're going to have impacts far beyond just our immediate park or our immediate neighborhood. We've been working with our public partners, the Charles Gate Alliance, a member of our board of advisors, neighbors, the Esplanade Association, the Friends of the Public Garden, and many others to really make a green vision for Charles Gate. And it's been a really wonderful project to be part of. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that have put time and supported that. Here's an image of that daylighting that is now part of MassDOT, Department of Transportation's project at the end of the Charles Gate area where it meets Stora Drive. We're really excited to see these improvements. Some of the elements are planned for construction as early as 2025. And so that's exciting. So I mentioned that was people, that was park work. Of course, another major element of what we want to do is support and engage all of the visitors, the residents, the people that use and depend on the parks. And we have a few different ways that we work to do that with your support. One is our public visitor center, which is open year round. And I do always like to remind everyone, it has a public restroom. We know that that is really important for park users, old and young, small and large. And we really hope that you do come by, take advantage of the displays, learn more about the history, let us know your thoughts about the park, what we can do. It's free, it's open year round, and we open it 5 days a week all year round and 7 days a week in the summer, and that will be starting again in mid-May. So please come and see us. That's in the Back Bay Fens, very close to the Museum of Fine Arts. It's a rather small, understated building, but it is there, and we would really love to have you. Of course, the lights on the Emerald Necklace was also another big program this year. This year, we highlighted trees in the Emerald Necklace versus bridges, which we've done in previous years. And these, I think, are some of a picture of some of the trees that we highlighted in the Charles Gate area, but we did it in a few other locations as well. Many of you may see the signage that we have been putting out in collaboration with various partners, both to, many of you are very aware of what's happening with the Muddy River restoration, but a lot of folks, probably don't understand what's going on. We have these fences up, what's that stuff doing in the river? And we do try and provide as much information as we can. So we put out some of these banners throughout the park system around the work areas this year, QR codes so people can learn more. Excuse me. Also, many of you may have seen that as during COVID, we started a temporary sign program, which has changing information to try and provide navigation of where you are, reminding you that there's another park, after this one, if you want to kind of keep on your journey, and a QR code there that can provide you information about programs, etc. And they've been popular. Would love to hear people's feedback if they had additional thoughts about the signs. One of the other major programs of the organization, of course, is our education, and we have a particular focus on our youth education program. We have a summer green team, and this is a picture of some of the members of our summer green team. Sorry, I think the slide just moved. I'm going to go back. And also starting a new Natural Ways program this summer, which is going to be a free, basically nature connection program for youth 11 to 13 this summer, free of charge. And we're working with some of the local Boys and Girls Clubs and others to do that. So thank you so much for the support of the USDA Forest Service. Has been a big supporter of that and has provided new funding for us to do that. And we're really excited to do that this year. And also our Canopy Classroom, which is what we call our third grade program, when we work with third graders from Boston Public Schools, bring them free of charge out to the park and do some field trips. So they, get to know the Emerald Necklace a little bit more and can continue to be part of their curriculum. Many of you likely followed, I hope, some of the work of the bicentennial program that the Conservancy led with the National Park Service and over 180 other partner organizations around Boston. We called it Olmsted Now, Greater Boston's Olmsted Bicentennial. This is actually a picture of the Machoon burn that Tom Green mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. It was a really new experience for me, for many of us, and I think it was really a tremendous learning experience this last year. We worked with a group of volunteers that led the program called the Committee of Neighborhoods. That was in response to a parks equity analysis that we did of all of the groups that we work with around the Emerald Necklace to try and further engagement with folks that may not have the same sense of welcome as others in the park or ability to work on important projects that are important to them and experiences they'd like to have in public space. The grant program that the Committee of Neighborhoods led awarded more than $200,000 to 16 projects all around Boston, some outside the necklace, some inside the necklace, that were focused on park equity. This was one of the examples, but there were many I encourage you, if you would like to learn more. We have a report where we really tried to summarize all of the work. Some of the work was quiet and was more smaller events. Some were bigger. So there certainly are things that that you can learn more about. And I want to say a special thank you to the Emerald Necklace Conservancy Board of Directors for funding that $200,000 grant program, which was really instrumental to the success of the Olmsted Now year. Of course, we do all of this work through the support and donations of generous individuals. And one of the ways that we gain support and let people know about our work and fundraise is Party in the Park, and that is coming up on May 17th. So if there are those of you that are interested, please reach out. We are always interested in additional supporters that would like to be part of that amazing event. It is going to be in Franklin Park this year. This fundraiser has raised more than $11 million to support tree care and capital improvements, park restoration, and other programs since its founding. And we really appreciate that the Party in the Park supports all the work that we do, as we are funded almost 100% by philanthropy. I'm going to so on the policy side of our work, as I was saying, we have sort of 3 areas that we put our work into categories around. In terms of policy work, the last year has been a very active one, as we have been continuing to champion a conversation around the restoration of 13 acres of parkland in Franklin Park that was originally parkland, actually not originally parkland. Originally, this land stewarded by Native peoples, but starting in the late 1800s, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted into a public park. And 13 acres of the Franklin Park has what became the location of a public hospital. The Department of Health and Human Services for the state has decided to demolish the building. And one of the things the Conservancy and many of our volunteers, other organizations in and around the park have been advocating for is a more transparent and inclusive process to determine the future use of these public lands. And so that is an ongoing conversation. There is a proposal right now for housing for the formerly homeless for this site, which we think is a really important need. And we're, of course, also interested in seeing, as much open space as possible to be restored within this context, this neighborhood. Mattapan, Roxbury, Dorchester, JP, these are all neighborhoods that can use as much open space as possible. So we've been trying to explore alternatives and find other ways to make sure that we can support our communities in the best way possible. And we'd like to make sure that all of the communities have a voice in those decision-making processes. Please learn more about it on our website if you'd like to. One of the diagrams shown here just shows, I think a lot of times people say, oh, Franklin Park's so big, there's room for everything. We do like people just to be reminded of how much of the park does have very specific dedicated uses and not necessarily, open and free for everyone. So land is really a premium here in Boston, and we want to make sure as much of it as possible can be available for the general public. This is a picture of some of the advocacy work that we do. I think my staff found me in a particularly grimace-like face, but this is when I was speaking in front of the city council. That is a lot of what both the Conservancy staff and leadership and the volunteers, the park advisors do is, talk about the things that are important to many of us and to many of you, and try and bring up the importance of supporting financially and in other ways, policy-wise, green space, because we know that there are a lot of important needs in a city like ours and in a time that we live in. So raising up and talking about the ways that parks and environmental projects that we work on can be part of that is a big part of our work. So I guess the last thing I think I'm near the end of my presentation. One of the major conversations that has been going on this year that I imagine some of you have been watching is the sunshine conversation, as we've been trying to encourage a conversation and a policy to support sunlight protection, sunshine protection for all of Boston's parks. There continues to be development and other new vertical housing and other types of development, lab space and other things around the Emerald Necklace. And many of them have been proposed would cast significant shadow on the Emerald Necklace. And this is certainly something that other parks also have to address. So one of the things that we've been working towards is encouraging a citywide policy for sunshine protection. You may know that 2 of Boston's parks, that's the Common and the Public Garden, have those protections, but others don't in the same way. And so we've been working on that. And I will say that this year we have it is our understanding, and we have to continue to follow this, with the Boston Planning and Development Authority, with some recent approvals, have set aside funds that would be coming through a project to provide a study for developing those sunshine protections. More to come on this, definitely a conversation that is ongoing. But I definitely want to make sure you all are aware, and those of you that are interested, I'd love to talk about further. Continue to advocate for increased urban forestry resources. And then I'm going to just quickly mention that we have some exciting year ahead. The Muddy River Project restoration, that project will be reopening. The fences will be coming down in certain areas, and we'll be celebrating that hopefully this fall. As many of you know, there's been significant funds dedicated to Franklin Park, and in line with the work that has been outlined in the Franklin Park Action Plan. And so we will want to work very closely to try and make sure that those dollars are deployed in the ways that the community and others have prioritized. This year, we're going to be doing strategic planning for the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. So really deciding how much, where our energies should be focused. And you will all be hearing from us now that you're registered and we have your email addresses, asking for your opinion about what you'd like to see the Emerald Necklace Conservancy do, what you'd like to see in the necklace, and how we can do that best. We are an organization that is made by the suggestions and the support that you provide us, and so we're setting our sights. We had a strategic plan, which is reaching the end of its life, and we are starting another one. This summer, we're going to have our Fest series. That's a series of summer events that are community centered and throughout the Emerald Necklace. Many of you also may know that there is a plan the city of Boston has funded and is leading to improve the pathways in the Back Bay Fens. So please pay attention to that. And of course, the Charles Gate Park Revitalization Project. There's so much to talk about. We have 1,100 acres. It's a lot to cover. Thank you for bearing with me. Happy to answer other questions. And I want to turn it over to our speakers. So thank you all for being here and taking the time to recognize the parks in this work this evening. Thank you. So
can you introduce Kate? Sorry, Karen.
Sure.
Kate can share. Thank you
So
so much.
I wanted to, I'm going to ask Kate England, who is the director of the Office of Green Infrastructure for the City of Boston, to take over the mic. And Kate, I'm going to let you tell everyone about your first experience with the Emerald Necklace. But she has a background in engineering, landscape architecture, planning, and policy, and has worked in the public sector in and around Boston for most of her career. She was appointed by Mayor Michelle Wu in July of 2022 to facilitate the widespread implementation of green infrastructure and help pursue the resilience goals outlined in Boston's Green New Deal. Prior to joining the city, Kate worked for the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, also Boston Water and Sewer, which is not in my notes, but she's worked with all of the organizations that have so big of a part in this. And there she served as the regional director for the Boston region when she was at DCR. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us.
Thanks, Karen. Can everybody hear me? I'm apologizing in advance. I'm losing my voice. Spring colds are the worst. Karen also alluded to the fact that my first real job in Boston was actually at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. I interned at ENC when I was in college in undergrad, and then they hired me when I graduated from undergrad. And the Emerald Necklace is now so deeply ingrained in my soul that all of the jobs I've had since then, I have found a way to do work in the Emerald Necklace. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about green infrastructure, stormwater, and a variety of other things that I find fascinating, and I hope you will as well. I'm going to start us off with a baseline around, what is stormwater, what is green infrastructure, and then we can talk a little bit more in depth about, why they're important and how they are relevant to the Emerald Necklace. So just as a, again, general introduction to stormwater, it's exactly what it sounds like. If you break the word down, it's water that comes from storms. And, in urban areas where we have lots of hard surface, paving, roadways, sidewalks, buildings, when rain falls on those hard surfaces and it's not able to absorb into the ground like it would in a natural environment, it becomes stormwater runoff. And so it runs off across the hard surfaces. The current way that, or I guess the historic way that we manage stormwater in cities is through catch basins in our roadways and a series of pipes underground. And so essentially how these things function is they capture the runoff from your road, and they send it through a series of pipes directly to our lakes, rivers, streams, and ultimately to Boston Harbor, unfortunately with very little pre-treatment. So what's the problem with the old way or the gray way of managing stormwater? It's twofold. So first, there's a water quality issue, and then second, there's a water quantity issue. So for those of us who are urban dwellers, who I assume are most of the people on this call, we've all seen what is on our roadways, what is on our sidewalks, what is on our hard surface. We have litter and sediment and nutrients and a variety of other things that are not particularly great for the health of our waterways. And so with gray infrastructure systems, those catch basins and pipes, all of that litter, all of the sediment, all of the bacteria and nutrients that is on our hard surfaces makes its way to our water bodies without being removed first. And then the second issue that we're seeing, and Karen mentioned this in her remarks as well, now that we're seeing more frequent and intense storms in Boston, largely due to climate change, we are seeing our existing stormwater system being overwhelmed more often. So our stormwater systems are currently sized for a design storm that is no longer the size or frequency of storms that we see. And so as a result, we're seeing more localized flooding, more flooding in our waterways. And it's that stormwater that again is carrying a lot of pollutants and other things that is going directly from our roads to our water bodies with no kind of treatment first. So to deal with some of these issues, we've got this wonderful tool called green infrastructure. I hesitate to call it a new tool because it's really not a new tool. It's actually going back to the way that nature manages itself. So for the purposes of this presentation, I got a couple of definitions for green infrastructure on the screen, but the big thing or the main kind of definition that I use is green infrastructure features use plants and soil and other natural materials to remove pollutants from stormwater and to allow stormwater to absorb back into the ground like it would in a natural environment. So you can see one of the other points that is made in here is that they restore natural hydrologic processes. So it allows nature to do what it used to do before humans came and paved and built and changed the fundamental hydrology of this area. So in addition to the stormwater benefits, green infrastructure also has a lot of what we call co-benefits. So non-stormwater related benefits. So examples, and some of this you've heard already from our previous speakers, green infrastructure features can help reduce the urban heat island effect. They help create green space in our cities. They can be used for pedestrian safety and to slow traffic on streets. They create biodiversity and pollinator habitat in the city. They can help reduce energy usage. They address a lot of environmental justice issues, including access to nature, better air quality, food security. You can actually grow food in a lot of these features. And they also provide wonderful opportunities for environmental education, which I, of course, feel very strongly about, since that was one of the first things I did at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, was help start the Green Team program. So glad to see that it's still going strong. So a couple of examples of green infrastructure features. We've got rain gardens and bioswales. These are probably the ones that you have seen or heard about most often. They're shallow, depressed areas where water can collect and slowly absorb into the ground. They're typically planted with native plants and trees, and they tend to be very pretty. We also have tree pits and tree trenches. You have probably walked over many of these, and porous paving materials. You've probably walked over many of these and not realized that you were walking over them. But essentially, a tree pit or a tree trench allows stormwater to feed the roots of trees that are planted in these features. So trees in the city of Boston, I'm sure many of you are aware of this. We have a relatively high juvenile tree mortality rate. And we have built several of these projects in Boston where we've installed new trees in stormwater infiltration trenches. We've had 0 tree death in these features, which is really wonderful. And we've seen a lot of really impressive tree growth in the first 5 years of life. So the trees that you're seeing on the screen have only been in the ground for, it's like 5 years since when this image was taken. And so these trees were about 2-inch caliper trees, which is about 2 inches in diameter when they went in. And now they're 6 to 8 caliper trees, which is really amazing amount of growth for a 5-year growth period. Porous paving also is a way to use, a material that allows water to pass through it. So for areas in the city where we need hard surface, walking zones, roadways, other things that are just kind of part of urban dwelling, using these materials allows water to pass through the surface and absorb back into the ground rather than running off and picking up pollutants and taking the waterways. Sorry, Roomba decided to go. We also have green roofs and constructed wetlands. Green roofs are becoming more and more common in the city of Boston, which makes me very happy. You have probably seen some really impressive ones. The image on the top left on this slide is one of my favorites. This is Milan, Italy, and this is the new style that they are building their apartment buildings. And the idea is that if you are an apartment dweller who lives on the 20th floor in an apartment building, if you look out your window, it feels like you are on the ground floor with trees right outside of your window. So really interesting, and love to see that this is happening elsewhere, and hopefully maybe we'll see it here too sooner rather than later. And then constructed wetlands are essentially what they sound like. Wetlands that are built by humans. They mimic the way that a natural wetland would function, and they can manage large volumes of stormwater. Okay, so wanted to show you a couple of examples of green infrastructure in Boston. Some of you may have seen these. So the first is the rain garden at South Street and Bussey Street. This is actually in the Arnold Arboretum. So if you're driving through the Arboretum, take a look. There are some new plantings that are going to be going in there this year because a year ago we had a utility truck drive through it. So apologies for those of you who loved this feature and then were very sad that it did not look great, but we are replanting it this year and it will be restored to this beautiful condition. We also have the Central Square project over in East Boston. There were 150 trees planted around Central Square. They're planted in stormwater infiltration trenches. And like I said, lots of really wonderful growth just in the first 5 years. We've also done a couple of pilot projects with the Boston Public Schools. So this is formerly the Washington Irving School, but now the Sumner Upper School in Roslindale. There are some beautiful bioswales, a really large bioretention area, and an infiltrating turf field in the backyard as well. And of course, Karen beat me to it, and she used the same image that I used, the Emerald Necklace. I happen to love this map. I also helped to make this map. But this, it's in my mind, is such a wonderful demonstration of, this kind of beautiful green necklace that flows through our, our rather developed and urban city. So I want to pop the green infrastructure definitions back up on the screen for everybody. So for those of you who question or doubt that maybe the Emerald Necklace isn't a green infrastructure feature, green infrastructure is an approach to water management that restores the natural water cycle. Check. And green infrastructure features utilize natural hydrologic processes to capture, purify, and infiltrate stormwater back into the ground. And it does that as well. The necklace is quite possibly the largest and one of the first green infrastructure features in the country. It is a shining example of a project that manages large volumes of stormwater. And it also has done it in this natural green vegetated way. So in my mind, the Emerald Necklace is a really wonderful example of what can be done, large projects that are possible in urban areas that use nature-based solutions, green infrastructure to manage our water quality and quantity problems. So wanted to talk a little bit about the Muddy River specifically, as this event is talking a bit about demystifying the Muddy River. So many of you have probably seen this historic image of the Emerald Necklace, and you can see that rather prominently featured throughout the extent of the necklace is the Muddy River. The park system is largely built around this wonderful water asset. And just a couple of fun facts for you all. The Muddy River is located in the Charles River watershed. It is a tributary of the Charles River. For those of you who are interested, watersheds are large land areas that all drain to a single point. So in the case of the Charles River watershed, the Charles River and all the land that drains to it all drains to the Boston Harbor. So the Charles River watershed ends at the harbor. It's also fun to note that the Muddy River is a single hydraulically connected system from Scarborough Pond in Franklin Park all the way to the Charles River via Charles Gate. So it's important to point this out, I think, because a lot of people don't realize that there is actually a water connection from Franklin Park all the way to the Charles, and that Charles Gate is the connection point between the Muddy River and the Charles River. So just for those of you who are wondering, how does Scarborough Pond connect to the Muddy River? There is a series of underground pipes, and the Stony Brook helps a little bit as well. And so if you were to drop a little rubber ducky in Scarborough Pond, you might be able to get it all the way down to the Charles, although I'm pretty sure that would be difficult, but the connection is in fact there. So I wanted to talk a little bit too about the impacts of stormwater on the Muddy River over time. So this is a zoomed in section of the map that we had up on the screen before, and I wanted to show everybody, this more natural looking shape to the Muddy River. Rivers are naturally serpentine. They wend back and forth. They have inlets and other natural shorelines that allow for wildlife and plants and other things to grow and to thrive. And so this image shows, what the Muddy River looked like, back in the Olmstedian days when the park was kind of first, established. And this is an image of the Muddy River today. And so I wanted to point out, for those of you who have keen eyes, if you look at the banks of the Muddy River and the shape of the Muddy River, it is no longer that same serpentine wending shape, and it has lost a lot of its natural landmass features that created those wildlife refuges, those habitat refuges, and allowed the natural ecology here to really thrive. And the main reason for this significant change in the morphology of this river is stormwater. So just a lovely image of the riverway when it was, again, first kind of established as a park. You can see that beautiful, kind of back and forth, that natural kind of inlets that are formed. And then this is the same area today. So this area of the riverway, you can see a lot of really visible signs of stormwater scour. So large storm events dumping lots and lots of water has caused the waterway to become rather channelized. And it has lost a lot of its natural shape, including a lot of the plant life and wildlife that used to live in and along the river. So just wanted to kind of like give these visuals to people to give an idea of the changes that we've seen in the Muddy River over time. And I think what a lot of us will be hoping to try to restore over the next several decades. The Muddy River also has had some pretty significant water quality impacts. So this is from the 303D impaired water list. You do not need to know what this means, but basically what you can see by the color red is that the Muddy River, Jamaica Pond, the Charles River, Boston Harbor are all considered impaired waterways by the EPA and by the state. And so what that means is whether it's bacteria or phosphorus or some other pollutant, nitrogen and other things, these waterways have a level of pollution in them that needs to be addressed. And so Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the state, DCR, and others are all working to improve the water quality in these water resources, working to change the system that has existed for years, where we have just dumped stormwater directly into these bodies of water with no treatment, by adding treatment largely in the form of green infrastructure. So pointing out, sorry, my slide transition's a little slow here. Wanted to talk a little bit about greening the Muddy River. And what this probably should be titled is the metamorphosis of the Muddy River. But I wanted to pull up an image that was actually taken in the early 90s of this. This is the section of the Muddy River in front of the Sears building, then the Landmark Center, and now 401 Park. You can see here that over time, parts of the river were covered over. The river was put in a culvert. Many of you on this call are probably familiar with the fact that this happened because it resulted in the Muddy River Restoration Project. But wanted to kind of show people the difference between how this looks and feels when it's covered over with a parking lot versus when it's opened up, daylighted, and that natural environment and habitat is allowed to exist again. So here's an image of the Sears building before. You can see completely surrounded by parking lots, all asphalt, some trees, but really not a lot. And then here's what it looks like today. Apologies for the flattened image, but you get the idea about how much of this area that once was paved is now green and vegetated, planted, with native species and trees. And this is what it looks like if you're standing in the park today. So very different feel than that parking lot that used to be there. And then we also have Charles Gate. So this is an image of Charles Gate, which is, again, that section of the Muddy River that connects the Muddy River to the Charles River. You can see the Charles River in the background. The road in the foreground is Commonwealth Ave, and then Beacon Street is kind of in the middle. So this was an image or a painting, or I'm not actually sure what it was, but this was taken, years and years ago before the construction of the roadways that are there now. So this map shows that kind of large, water body that used to be visibly and tangibly connected to the Charles. You can see that there were some ponds, there were some underpasses where you could, boat under and then access the Charles. And then Sturrow Drive was built. And so you can see that there was a good amount of landfill that happened. The Charles and the Muddy essentially became farther apart than they were initially with the addition of all of this land, and the Bowker Overpass and the Boylston in and outbound lanes now cut right on top of Charles Gate. So it's a very different feel than before. Although I will say, again, this is an image from the early 90s, that there has been some restoration that has already been done in the form of additional vegetation and green space. So I'm going to click forward and back a couple of times because it takes a second for your eyes to adjust. So you can see that there's been some pretty significant tree growth, new vegetation added, and lots of new tree cover that was not there before. So things are trending in the right direction. And who knows, maybe in the future, we'll have wonderful green space all along Charles Gate, more green infrastructure, maybe some floating wetlands in there. There are a lot of really wonderful people working to really restore that greenery and that green infrastructure to the Muddy River as a whole, but specifically Charles Gate and other areas that that are really needed for that connection, to feel that connection from the Muddy to the Charles. And I'm going to stop there. I know we have wonderful other speakers who are going to be speaking as well. I look forward to answering questions later in the program, and thank you so much for giving me some time to share with you all.
Thank you so much, Kate. I am going to thank you again, and we're going to have an opportunity for folks to ask Kate questions. Kate, that red map was so powerful.
Yeah.
Geez. So next, we're going to, it was great to see some of the work that Kate talked about, because actually that is work that Charter Construction and Bob Delhome and Kate Jacintho's team, made happen for the area, for the Army Corps of Engineers, which was led the project. I wanted to just mention about Bob. He is the president and founder of Charter Companies. He's an award-winning real estate development and construction executive with expertise in civil construction, environmental remediation, and the development of distressed real estate. As founder and president, Bob has led the Charter Companies since inception. And what began as a startup in 1997 is now a multifaceted environmental, civil construction, and real estate development firm that continues to grow and evolve. We're really grateful that Charter Construction has been a supporter of the necklace and the Conservancy. And also, I think Bob's even been willing to walk around Charles Gate with us a couple of times and get into some of the weeds of some of the future creative work, is what we call it, that we are working on now. So Bob and Kate, please feel free to start sharing.
Sure. No, thank you, Karen. Yeah, no, I have to say that over the years, I'd say that the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and many folks that are on this call have really kind of turned this into a professional but personal passion project. And Kate, I got to say, we're very fortunate to have you here in the city of Boston. That was a great overview, and I was paying attention really eagerly with all that you had to say, and excited about what's ahead. Also, thank you to Tom for candidly offering a perspective that we don't hear from enough, that I found not only educational, but candidly quite humbling. So thank you for that. So we really appreciate, on behalf of Charter and really on behalf of the Army Corps of Engineers and the project stakeholders, to talk about the work that we've had the privilege to do. So joining me is Kate Jacintho, the project manager overseeing the work. Ashley Delaccio, thank you, Ashley, for putting together the presentation. I'm going to move fairly quick through the phase one components to really allow Kate to talk about phase two. Before getting started, Charter has been under contract with the Army Corps of Engineers. We've been involved with the project since 2011, when we first started drafting a proposal for the phase one work. And oddly enough, even though we've been involved for close to 12 years, I still feel like we're sort of the new person on the block. And there's so many folks here and agencies that have, literally been advocating for decades. So I do want to mention how much we value, while being under contract to the Army Corps, of being a facilitator on behalf of the City of Boston, the Parks Department, Town of Brookline, certainly Mass DCR, the Conservancy, the MMOC, and many other passionate supporters of this project. What a privilege it's been. So our vision as a company is really to be the sought after partner of choice leveraging our technical skill sets to provide differentiated, safely executed solutions to complex environmental remediation, civil construction, and brownfield development challenges. And this project over the last 10 years has certainly afforded us each of those opportunities. We really had to bring to bear the full organizational capacity. This is a very complicated project. Our construction teams have been implementing the work, kind of boots on the ground. That's the yellow equipment, and the very hardworking, dedicated teams that have been boots on the ground. Our environmental services team have been really tasked with characterizing the sediments that have been generated through the dredging of the Muddy River, and then being able to repurpose them. In our development capability, we're in a public-private partnership on the waterfront in the city of Lynn. I think Olmsted would be very excited to hear that sediments that are being generated in the process of restoring the Muddy River are being beneficially reused to construct another urban waterfront park that in the future will be historic itself. So it really has taken our full capabilities to execute this work. Little background, I don't want to spend too much time on this, as most of you already know this and know this really well. But essentially the work that we've been undertaking, through phase 1 and phase 2, really has its genesis in the Muddy River Restoration Project, the Emerald Necklace Environmental Improvements Master Plan, which really identified the actions to reduce potential flood damages, improve water quality, habitat in the river, rehabilitate the historic landscape, enhance the recreational uses of the adjacent parklands. It is actually, for the Army Corps of Engineers, it's the most high-profile project that they've undertaken in the city of Boston since the building of the Charles River Dam, actually. So within phase 1, really, as Kate talked about, as urban development took place in the 50s and 60s, and the Muddy River was placed into the culverts, and we see some images here that I really like the ones that the Kate shared in the prior presentation. But as the Muddy River was placed into culverts and buried to make way for parking lots and roadways, that infrastructure just couldn't absorb or treat the stormwater as Olmsted's kind of green infrastructure and what Kate will be restoring here in the city in the future could manage. And so as a result, street water flowed directly into the river, along with harmful bacteria, pollutants, and sediments. Over time, those sediments and invasive plants choked and really caused the unmaintained river to reduce the flow and really created not just a flood hazard, but a breeding ground for bacteria as well. Due to the continued urban development, the areas surrounding the river continue to become impacted by substantial flooding events that caused extensive damages. And many of us recall very clearly the impact of the 1996 flood, which really resulted in extensive damage to businesses and to property. Road closures, the MBTA shutdown, and an estimated damages of in excess of $70 million. So the phase 1 scope, and here it is under construction, and that was the image that we saw earlier that really represented the parking lot for Sears. So within phase 1, the key elements of that work were certainly daylighting the Muddy River. And here we see that taking place where the culverts were exposed and the channels demolished. And really one of the key features here was replacing the 6-foot culverts with the 24-foot precast culverts that we see here going beneath the roadway. Other key elements really resolved around the road realignment. And it also had a significant component of utility relocation. And so phase 1 was really, around relocating the infrastructure that was now constraining restoration of the Muddy River. And, a challenging component of that, while this work was being put underway, was not only just the very challenging construction components, but it was certainly the traffic and pedestrian management. There was at least 8 planned traffic events that allowed us to sort of redirect traffic. And the feedback we got, as much as it was an impact to many commuters, that in terms of improving access to the hospitals for life safety, even during the construction component, that there was improved traffic flow. We're also very proud of the fact that in relocating these major utilities, that there was not any lost power incidents, and there certainly was no flood events, and that was really an element of the team and the design that was implemented. So flashing a little bit before, we can see some of the before imagery here that we've seen some of earlier, and then we get to see an opportunity of what the flow looked like after the phase 1 work had been implemented. It's pretty dramatic. While it doesn't necessarily exactly mimic the image we saw of the riverway in its original rendering, you can see that we're getting much closer to having a natural riverbank, native vegetation, and a much more natural flow that's allowing a much healthier waterway to be in place. So that was a very quick overview of phase 1. I didn't want to spend too much time restating features of that work that you're familiar with, but we'll certainly be happy to answer any questions relative to that. And with that, I'll ask Kate Jacintho to join in and bring us through the work that's being undertaken through phase 2.
Good evening, everyone. So a project manager, the active project that's ongoing right now, project kicked off in 2020, May of 2020, really. Again, administered by the Army Corps of Engineers with very wonderful support from City of Boston, Town of Brookline, Boston Parks and Recreation Department, and of course, all the wonderful advocates of the park. We appreciate your involvement, and it's been a really wonderful partnership, a project that I'm very proud to be part of. This section of the project was really to focus on about 3.5 miles of restoring river. It was broken up into 13 different work areas. Each work area had components of dredging to remove sediment for disposal, increasing channel capacity, removing invasive vegetation, stabilizing and restoring the riverbanks. Also included, some significant restoration of historic features as well. The scope really also included some major pre-characterization of sediments. So we had to go out and essentially decide where these sediments were going to go. So major effort at the beginning of the job, went out, took cores of everything, sampled that, and then had to go out and find facilities to take the materials based on the chemical and physical characteristics of the sediment in the river. We certainly had some challenges around that, but all the sediment has been taken somewhere, including some of it went off to Lynn Landfill, like Bob mentioned earlier. Installed massive amounts of erosion controls. Obviously, as we're doing this kind of work, we are going to destabilize some of the park. We need to be able to access the work areas. So a lot of erosion controls were installed to make sure that we are not negatively impacting the river. And so you can see in this picture here, this is, we had to install access to the river to be able to go out and dredge these sediments. One key piece of this project that was important is just how to manage the water flow. There was, at a certain point, the project was designed to be done in the dry. It's a very challenging way to conduct a project in a very active, large river that's managing millions of gallons of stormwater. So Charter opted to do most of this in the wet, which required that we install a lot of turbidity curtains and really identify the best ways, the safest ways to access the river. So we had installed quite a bit of roads out into the river, utilize marsh buggies or an amphibious excavator. I'm sure many people have seen them out there working. They're out in the river, driving trucks out into the middle of the river. It's an interesting sight to see, but we have completed all the dredging work at this point, but we constructed many roads to complete this work over 3 phases, 3 years. We excavated over 80,000 cubic yards of sediment, and all of that sediment, over 120,000 tons has gone off, like I mentioned. We also eradicated over 7 acres of invasive species, mainly focused on Phragmites, which have been choking out the river. Also knotweed, which is very invasive, very challenging to eradicate. Certainly a challenge that the Emerald Necklace will still be trying to tackle in the future years, certainly Phragmites as well, I expect. But we also are very grateful to everyone who was able to support the removal of the large section of Phragmites behind the Boston Fire Department. That was not part of the original contract. Charter just recently finished that work. We were so happy that we were able to get that done. It looks just so wonderful. We're just about ready to start landscaping that now, but it was, we were sad to think it was going to remain in place before we left. So anybody who supported getting that done, we appreciate that, because it's for the greater good of the river. We spent a lot of time in the beginning and throughout the whole job protecting the trees. You can see in the photo here, there's laminate mats, but also wood chips. Basically everywhere we went around this park, we kept our equipment off of basically native soil. We made roads connecting each of the work areas. Anywhere where there was going to be tree roots or any concern that there'd be tree roots, we spent a lot of time protecting those surfaces so that our equipment was, the weight of our equipment, it was going to be dispersed evenly and also just not directly on any tree roots. So you may have seen, several miles of mats at a certain point in time that were put down, and we use that to basically get all of our equipment, all of our trucks to be able to haul all of our sediment all over the site and to basically have the least amount of impact to the trees as possible. We also, over the past, this will be our 3rd season now, have been conducting a lot of landscape restoration, installing new trees, native shrubs and bushes, and restoring several acres of wetland. Challenging process to establish wetlands. Phase 1 had a significant amount of that. Took a lot of lessons learned from that and how we approached the installation of the wetland this time around. This far, we have quite a few that are already very successful. They're fully growing. It's very exciting to see them with, dozens of species of wetland plants growing. We have a lot of wetland plugs growing as well. In the coming fall, we're hoping to open up a few more sections as establishment of those areas is coming to an end. We also restored and installed a flood wall at the fire department that was completed not last summer, but the summer before, maybe. Yeah, summer of 2021. It's a very beautiful wall. It should protect the fire department and many possible future flood conditions. There's also a 700-gallon pump station also installed on the inside of the wall to try to protect the fire department from any other extreme conditions. Worked very closely with MMOC and Landmarks to get the look of that wall just right. People are very passionate and we appreciate their involvement. They came out many times to inspect that the grout was just right. The color of everything was just right. It was wonderful to just see how passionate people are about those things. They're just little details, but they definitely make a difference, and the wall looks just wonderful. So we also, as we come to an end, as we walk our way out of here, we will be restoring a lot more stone dust paths. There are a lot of areas that have been restored already, but returning all those stone dust paths to nice soft features that people can enjoy walking on. You'll also see around a lot of the sites, there's already a black chain link fence up that's very similar to what was put up in phase 1. It's really there to deter people from trampling anything while plants are really trying to be established, but most of those things will come down and the park will be returned to just an open feature. We wanted to just highlight a few challenges of this project. It is really huge footprint to be trying to manage. Obviously being in an urban environment, just it's highly visible and people really are very interested in what we're doing. And we try to provide the least disturbance possible, and make sure that we're not impacting traffic and how people can enjoy the park if we didn't need to be taking over sections. So early on, we try to take on just the smallest footprint as possible. But as we started to need more area and, we had to start taking over the whole footprint. I know that was at some points there was challenges around that. The public is very interested. I know a lot of the groups, advocate groups for this project, were very good at communicating those changes. So we really felt like we didn't get a lot of negative feedback, but people felt informed that they were going to be losing a space. So most of that usually went well. There are many areas that are going to be returned back to hopefully this fall though. So I look forward to being able to give you guys some of the park back. But like I mentioned before, this project kicked off in 2020, and the peak of COVID certainly created a lot of challenges for everybody, but we tried to just truck along. We had a lot of our project team basically working in isolation. We weren't meeting in the trailer. Most of our people in the field were just working outside all day. Rain, sunshine, snow, cold, warm, whether it's hot or cold. We had to make a lot of adjustments, but continued to try to push the project along. COVID has also caused massive supply chain issues. I'm sure many people are affected in their day-to-day regarding that, but a lot of products and were needed to be able to conduct this work. So we had to work very closely with our vendors and our suppliers, our disposal facilities. I mean, so many people just were working understaffed. So it took a lot of work and coordination to keep us moving forward. But again, there are so many people that are proponents of this project that help us keep that going, along with our vendors and our subcontractors. They really wanted to do a really fine job here. And so we're able to keep the work moving. My dogs are scrambling in the background, so I apologize. We also had some other, charter certainly would consider them safety challenges, but this project was had a lot of public interaction. We left Agassiz Road open to the public all day. We did close it for vehicular traffic for a lot of safety reasons, but we had to work around people constantly, and we value that, public safety very highly. So we had a lot of extra people on site. We had people stationed all over the job site. Earlier on, when we were working all the way, say up at work area 6, which is much closer to the upstream end of phase 1, all of that was connected all the way down to our staging area, which is down on Agassiz Road. So basically traveling inside the park on matted roads, crossing over several different footbridges, and those footbridges remain open to the public. We had people staged at each of those footbridges to basically keep people aware, stopping and letting people pass, but we also had to do that at Agassiz Road, which is a very highly trafficked area. So challenging, but the project has been very successful. Really, we've had no incidents, so we're very proud of that. Some other kind of environmental challenges we had. This is a big project, and the intent of this project was also to minimize the footprint that we were impacting. This is you can see an image here of one of our mixing bins. This is where all of our sediment was brought. We would mix in an amendment to try to dry that sediment out to make sure it could be trucked and for a facility to actually maintain it at a landfill. So these areas are very small, but when you have to move 80,000 cubic yards of dredge sediment, you need a lot of space, but that was not offered to us with good intention. And so very challenging logistics of being able to mix a small amount, but you want to move a lot. But we have a lot of talented people who know what they're doing, worked really hard to keep the flow of material going, keeping the material mixed, and also our environmental services group, making sure that we always had facilities to take this to the right timing of that, and really excellent truck drivers that are respectful of the project, respectful of the urban environment, and very patient with us working through that process. Here's a little image of early phase of the flood wall. That's really the concrete piece now. It'd be nice if we had a good after picture, but we may not. You can see some of the Phragmites there too. Those are all gone now. I think I probably covered a good chunk of the challenges, but here's some imagery of some of the before and after. Here you can see this is the large section that is actually behind our trailer. So between Agassiz Road and the I don't know what road that footbridge connects, but closer to Louis Prang, there was originally an island out there. We actually used that island as a place to kind of jump off and dredge this section. This is actually the largest section of dredging we conducted. It was about 35,000 cubic yards just in this work area. This was considered work area 10. We removed that whole island, removed a lot of Phragmites here. This took us over 8 months to just do this one section of the river, but it looks wonderful now. It was planted in the fall of 2022. And we have really high success rate so far. We're really looking forward to seeing the wetlands coming in this year too. Actually, have some nice little videos. So you can kind of see some of the differences here, the Phragmites in the background. You can see our herbivore fence that protects some of the wetland area from waterfowl. But all of these areas were full of Phragmites, and we were able to remove all of those and restore them. So I'm just going to highlight where we're at and what to expect in the coming months as we basically come to the end of this project. It was super exciting. It's been a long road. A long 3 years, a very exciting 3 years to be part of this project. So landscape in the last areas, work area 6, that is the very upstream end of phase 1. So just upstream of the landmark building, work area 11 and 12, which is basically what's highlighted just downstream of Agassiz Road, which is right through the center of that image. Kind of on the right there is where our work chillers are. And the Boston Fire Department is kind of where the red roof is there in the middle of the picture. But those are considered work area 11 and 12. On the right bank was all of the Phragmites that we removed recently as part of a significant change to the job. As I mentioned earlier, all those areas are going to get landscaped starting next Monday. Wetland seed was planted this week. And so we will hopefully have all of those areas planted. The final planting season will be completed in June of this year. Following the landscape restoration, we intend to install all the landscape protection fence. That kind of gives us access to be able to open up some areas to the public. That would end in July. And then we would, oh my dogs, this is kind of embarrassing.
No, we can hear you, but they sound like they're having fun. It's all good.
I am home alone. My husband took my 2 children out of the house because I would never be able to do this. So I apologize. Anyways, following that, we would install all of the remaining sidewalks that we'd restore. So most of those are either sidewalks that we've damaged because we've been driving on them for 3 years, or they were in poor condition before. And so we're gonna return them to the public in really nice condition. Those would also finish in July. And then we would roll into really a big project, big milestone, and that would be restoration of Agassiz Road. A lot of work to be done there. The road is in poor condition. The sidewalks are in poor condition. And we really need to walk ourselves out of there. So that is planned to be finished in August of this year. At the same time, we would also be wrapping up the Stone Dust Pass, most significantly the one that's behind the fire department, and the one that's around the trailer. Those also have nice little historic features. There's old cobblestones there. They'll look really nice when we're done. And then, finally us really walking out of there is September of 2023. And hopefully you'll see work areas 3, 4, 7, well, 3 and 4 are already open to the public, but 7, 8, and 9, and 10, which basically connects the very downstream of phase 1 all the way down to Agassiz Road. We're hoping to be able to return that to the public this fall. The other areas will remain somewhat closed off to the public while the plants are established.
Thank you so much. Is that your last slide? Don't want to.
It is, yeah. No, I was gonna let Bob.
All I heard was party this fall.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to find a way to certainly celebrate that milestone, and it's certainly something that we want to collaborate with the Conservancy on. But, you know, again, I think just touching on a lot of what we discussed here is that with the project complete, you know, bringing the Muddy River back more closely restored to what Olmsted's original vision was, for an open greenway, providing, you know, not just recreational and open parks, but really bringing a highly functional element to the city of Boston relative to flood mitigation and stormwater management. So look forward to celebrating that milestone when we get there with the Conservancy.
Are those trucks as good at moving large amounts of champagne as they are dredge sediment?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna give Karen a little chance to drink water and rest up, but I just want to thank all of our presenters again, Tom, Karen, Kate, Bob, and Kate. And we haven't left time officially for questions, but I know a lot of you have stuck around because this is completely riveting materials. So we have a few questions that people have already populated in the chat. If you have questions for our speakers, please keep writing them in the chat, and our team is online here. They'll help keep me honest. We had a few questions submitted along the way. And then if you want to raise a question live, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. So thank you, Karen. You can stop sharing now. And I think one of the first questions I saw while you guys are thinking of your own, early in the presentation, someone had asked if we have a way of showing the different jurisdictions in the necklace, like which public partners are working where. So I'm just going to pop that up on my screen. And Karen, or if you want to kind of walk us through this map a little bit, we do have three, or I guess I can. Boston, Town of Brookline, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts are here on this map, and the colors are majority Boston, if people can see this kind of grayish blue. And then orange is DCR, and then here we have Brookline, which is long and sinuous along the Riverway and in Olmsted Park. So this 1,100 acres have these three major partners, and then we work with a lot of different public agencies, depending on where we're interacting with the water or roadways or other kinds of infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Nika. This map sort of shows the different public agencies, and there's even a little more nuance this map. We're finding new ways we want to update this map that we sort of made because of the tree work we were doing to try and make sure we kept everything straight. But there's definitely many of you may know the Casey overpass has come down to street level. That was Department of Transportation, now DCR. So we need to relabel that section of the map. You may know that around Charles Gate, the jurisdiction there is both DCR on the land, but Department of Transportation above. So if anyone in specific has specific questions, please reach out to us by our email. We'll make sure we put that in the chat, or phone, and we can certainly try and help. If you had something specifically you wanted to speak to someone about, we could try to figure out who the best person would be to talk to.
Yes, some really good actionable advice. One of our many, many roles and hats that we wear is kind of knowing who's in charge of where and where to direct questions. So we are kind of an information service. I see a hand from Derek. Derek, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure. There, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. This has been a great meeting, and I'm glad to be here. And I also greatly enjoyed the event at the MFA, where Byron Rushing spoke. I don't have a question, but I do want to share something that I think is very important. And before I do, I should briefly tell you who I am, because you don't know. And you would, because if I hadn't been missing for 25 years from Boston, I would know many of you, and you would know me because of the nature of the work that's been discussed here. Derek Evans, I'm with the Community Stewards and Friends of Malcolm X Park here in Roxbury, which is adjacent to and I live atop a channelized, sunken former smelt brook, which was a tributary to the Stony Brook, which of course is part of the no longer visible drainage of the watershed, and that excellent definition and explanation of how that all works. I have been since 2003 to now, mostly on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, where I'm a native of a freedman settlement there. And I've been spending my time very much responding to 21st century converging challenges of race and environment, which you can imagine on the Gulf Coast and in a place called Mississippi. But in Boston, I developed a great affinity for Olmsted and for the necklace. In fact, I even worked my way through Boston College doing tree and shrub work at the Gardner estate adjacent to Olmsted's digs in Brookline. I spent the last 25 years discovering unexpectedly that conservation and restoration, particularly of coastal wetlands, was a not yet popular and still not popular environmental justice issue. But it was urgent on the Gulf Coast for my historic community and for the larger Gulf Coast, as we're talking about adaptation and climate change and all of that. So I learned a lot of lessons on the ground over 25 years in the Gulf Coast, including Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill, that I think are applicable here in Boston. And I have to say that I was quite shocked after my very difficult experience in Mississippi, doing things like landing an $8 million NIFWIF grant for an estuary's restoration in a predominantly Black and low income part of Mississippi, to come back to Boston in March of last year to find myself during the 200th year anniversary of Olmsted, seeing Malcolm X Park, which is an Olmsted legacy park. It was Olmsted brothers, his sons, who designed this beautiful place on Honeysuckle Hill and the pudding stone outcroppings and all that. And to get to my point, I think that we all who have this interest in these expertise areas need to get really, really serious, real fast, as Olmsted would, who advised us that it would be in urban park spaces and so forth that we would be able to encounter democracy, right? Regardless of ethnic or class or language diversity. But the problem is, he didn't anticipate that the second half of the 20th century was in Boston going to add an increasing racial component to that. And I would say that the experience that we had with Malcolm X Park last year, which involved the removal of too much legacy tree and canopy and the introduction of too much previously non-existent concrete and destruction of pudding stone, and nearly almost the introduction of acres of PFAS for a soccer field in an Olmsted legacy park, was just alarming and disgusting here in the Athens of America and the birthplace of Olmsted. So going forward, I think we need to have some serious conversations, both within the Conservancy and other folks who do adjacent work, about what I would call green lining, which I think people have become familiar, particularly since George Floyd, with red lining as it applies to housing and urban development. But the experience that we had in Roxbury last year, I think, was an example of what's been for decades, a green lining, which for decades meant neglect that effectively served as preservation. And now investment that some of which is not necessary and is justified because of, and this is my final point, a disparate valuation of city park and public lands that would have disallowed some of what happened in this park across the street had it been on the Boston Common or elsewhere, where the per square foot valuation by the city of Boston's assessors require, for instance, ADA investment, which is important, accessibility. But there was no effort made whatsoever on this steep pudding stone historic Olmsted legacy park on a hill to do that smart, do that right. And the swift at the end of it all excuse was to make it ADA compliant, because the city had just recently been sued about that at sidewalks, but not steep pudding stone outcroppings. So that's my point. I wish us all the best. We have a lot of work to do. I'm very inspired by the Muddy River project and the process and success to date. But we got to pay some attention to not only within the Emerald Necklace, but what you might call the inner pearls, right, of Boston's invaluable existing park space, so that nothing like this happens again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek, for coming. It was great to see you last night. I've gotten so much of your time this week, and I guess I really appreciate your remarks, and I think these are really great questions, and I wonder if I would love to have your involvement, and anyone on this call that would like to, as we are doing our strategic plan right now, working on the Conservancy's next strategic plan to, talk about areas of focus and areas that that community members and others would like to see us work on. I think our consultant is literally watching this right now, so I think this is a great time to hear your comments, and there'll be ways for folks to be involved in that, so we can talk about where our areas of focus should be over the coming 5 to 7 years. So thank you so much, Derek. Is there, Nika, is there anyone else that wants to?
Yeah, well, we had a couple other questions in the chat. Just getting, help me out if there are hands that come up as well, but we had a question from Chris, potentially for Kate, England. Is the city's priority to do these more large scale green infrastructure projects, or is the focus still on the street and neighborhood scale? So I don't know, Kate, if you feel comfortable addressing that on the city's behalf.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So still continuing, the efforts to kind of integrate green infrastructure into the city's everyday projects, which, is a really kind of good first step in really broadening our design and construction of green infrastructure. But my office and my team is going to be doing a site prioritization and site assessment study starting sometime probably just after July next fiscal year, that will be intentionally identifying some locations for larger projects. I'm not sure that we could necessarily promise to equal the size of the Emerald Necklace, for example, but I think that one of the things that I'm personally interested in is looking for locations where there can be large impact, not just on a stormwater level, but, to Derek's point and others, but also in restoring some environmental justice and equity. And so that would include, accessibility, and that would include, transportation routes and multi-use paths through these spaces that bring, that have actual intentional connections to neighborhoods around these locations. The idea here being that, identifying large locations that can have large stormwater impact doesn't just have to be a stormwater project, it can also achieve multiple goals. And so for that side of the work, there'll be work with or collaboration with other city departments. And those conversations have already started. So more to come, a little bit of both is the short answer. But I'd say that there's a pretty good chance that you'll see some large projects sometime in the next, several years.
That's awesome. Perhaps another annual meeting if it's near us.
That's great.
Thank you. Jeff, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a question for Bob or Kate. So we talk about all this stuff about parks and renovation and design and all this wonderful stuff, Olmsted, but you guys get to do it. And, you have to deal with all these crazy people that have got 25,000 ideas, but they really don't know what it's like to, you know, dredge a river or get rid of phragmites. You know, we make it, oh, well, just get rid of the phragmites like you're pulling a dandelion out of your backyard. So you do, this is your work, but you do a lot of like nasty stuff. And suddenly you're in this very special historic place with very special historic people and neighborhoods and everything. What's it like to deal with all these crazy people?
It has been a hallmark of certainly my career, Jeff, and I'll be, you know, really honest with you. This has the benefit of being the truth when I say that we've learned so much from all of you. It's unbelievable. You know, when you've been involved with a construction project like this one for as long as you have, you know, candidly, project fatigue can set in. And when you have such an energized group of stakeholders who bring energy and passion to a project, we found it to be really motivating. And candidly, all of you pulled out the best of what we had to offer. And so it's been an absolute privilege. You turned me into an incredible Olmsted nut, by the way, which has been another gift that's happened as a result. So it really has been a privilege. Kate has really been boots on the ground and been the point person on behalf of Charter. So Kate, I hope I'm not, if you have a different perspective, please share. It's also been made, you know, the stakeholders, we've been involved with them from the beginning. I mean, you know, to have the continuity of a Tom Brady, to have a continuity of the Boston Parks Department, just consistently present during the project. So it's been an absolute privilege. I will say that you challenged us to be better than construction contractors, and we had to become facilitators.
Yeah, I just to say a lot of credit has to be given to the Army Corps, because they're the ones that field a lot of those questions and people's concerns. They are they send the message, they're the messenger a lot. But I would say just, you know, there's one question on the chat asking about turning Agassiz Road into a bike path. That is just, you know, it's an idea that's been put out in the chat, and I know DCR has a few different visions for Agassiz Road. It is not what's in our contract now. But those are challenges that are presented to us because we love people's vision like that. And as much as we would love to go ahead and do something like that, it's not that easy to just change the contract. But when you have a lot of people advocating for that, in the case of, say, the removal of those additional phragmites, and people can help push that along from the non-federal sponsor component, and all these groups, it does create this motivation and momentum to be able to do that while we're here. But not all of that is always possible, certainly towards the end of the project when we have an administrative component to the contract that can be very challenging. But we love people's ideas, and if we can help make those things happen, we've tried to do that all along. But that also requires the partnership from you all. That you guys are the ones that drive that, and it's you know, the passion that comes along with this is what makes the project move forward in that way. Projects don't function that way, and typically it's really comes from the people who love the park that are making the changes and bringing your ideas to life. We're happy to help make the ideas come to life.
And there's going to be no lack of ideas for ways to improve the park from this group, and I really appreciate that. And I will say that there is a City of Boston project underway right now to think about a lot of those connections and bike and pedestrian access improvements. So I'm hopeful that a lot of these good ideas will be captured, and we can put a link in the chat to that capital project. And please, you know, feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to know more about that. Nika, is there? I know we're near the end of time.
Well,
here.
I was just going to say the group is very inquisitive. We have several more questions, and I, you know, invite folks if they need to move on with their evenings. We are recording, so we will share what is left. But we do have a few more questions. If you are having to join us, I'm sorry, leave us early, Thank you for joining us and thank you for your support. And Karen is sharing some links to stay involved. But since we just had Bob and Kate on the line, there was a question in as well. If there's an estimated expected increase in stormwater capacity or decrease of risk of flooding, if there is a numeric value that can be attributed to what the expected outcome is at the completion of phase 2.
There, Bob. You.
Yeah, if you want to go, I mean, I'll just say
Okay.
conceptually that yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the primary objectives of increasing, not just flood capacity and water storage and retention, but also by creating the conduits and the banking in the manner that they've been constructed. Certainly the primary objective was to increase the retainage capacity of the river.
Last night at the Muddy River presentation, there was a slide, and I'm reading it off because I took a picture. That said that, we knew that we were trying to go for a 20-year storm, and that was one of the requirements in the goals of the project. And it talked about the total quantity of daylighting, dredging, and so a 20-year storm. And I don't know exactly what the number of gallons of that is.
I don't know either, Karen, but I was gonna try to highlight for everyone is the anticipated 20-year storm flood conditions for a 20-year storm is what the project was designed to take the capacity of that.
And that means, for those of us that don't speak storm, it means that the kind of storm you would get potentially every 20 years, which is a more frequent storm than like 100-year storm or a 200-year storm. And what we think we know is there going to be more and more of these storms over time because of climate change. So in theory, we're going to be we're better prepared. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to that. Nika, anything else?
I'm going to just ask one more question and then let everyone go. I think we could stay here for quite a long time, but maybe we'll do a part 2 after the river is unveiled. There's a question if there are any combined sewage overflows going into the Muddy and what can be done to avoid them. Kate England has an answer for us.
Yeah, I think there might be one left because the rest have been separated. And I believe it's in the Fens, if I remember correctly, although I'm not sure exactly where. And the way that we typically advise, being stormwater engineers, typically advise the public and others about how to prevent CSOs is building storage capacity for stormwater upstream, like in the little watershed that drains to that specific outfall. So in this case, building some green infrastructure features, for example, that would provide storage for stormwater before it gets to the storm drain system so that those overflows don't happen. Because the reason that we get stormwater CSOs, combined sewer overflows, is when there's too much stormwater in our combined sanitary and stormwater pipes. And so the pipes become full, and then they have to release some of the liquid in them via the built-in release point, which is the combined sewer overflow. So the more stormwater you can take out of the storm drain system, so the more stormwater you can capture and absorb into the ground with green infrastructure, the fewer CSOs you have. So selfishly, I thank you for asking that question, because it's great to talk about how wonderful green infrastructure is from a environmental and water quality perspective like that. So advocate for green infrastructure in your neighborhoods.
Jen?
I know Tom Green had to leave the meeting as we're at a late stage, but I was texting him to ask if it was okay to bring up for another site, actually at the Charlestown boat ramp. We know that there is a future plan for the revitalization of that site and greening the site and making it a park. And Tom was able to talk with the landscape architects who are working on that project to simply remind them that in asking community constituents about work on the sites, that there's a lot of great historical knowledge and a lot of potential for engagement with the sites or ceremony at the sites if they're designed with that in mind. And so I know these are landmarked sites, but also just a question, I guess, for Kate in general, if that's something that could be incorporated, I guess, with city or with agencies and conversations in terms of being able to take in that knowledge as well and work that into some of the plans or some of the decisions where that green infrastructure work could happen.
It's for me personally, it factors into my thinking quite often. And now that I'm in a role where I have a little bit more control over scoping and ultimate, designs that get approved, I think that would be wonderful. There's so much opportunity, especially, when we're creating new green space. And by creating new green space, I mean really restoring green space that was once there. But we frequently talk about like, what does it mean to restore green space? What are we restoring back to? So like, for example, in the Muddy River and the Emerald Necklace, we're restoring back to Olmsted, but that's not restoring back to like the indigenous times. So like I try not to use the word restore as much as I use the word, designing for the future with respect and reverence to the past. So I think it's really, it's definitely on my radar as something that I'd like to do more often. And honestly, those conversations, especially facilitated by groups like I think are really valuable to design in general, because you have so many consultants and designers and others who might not otherwise be exposed to this kind of knowledge in these conversations. And so I think as often as possible, we should be thinking about, thinking about how do we really incorporate Indigenous land management into our projects and create those spaces, not just for ceremony, but also again, for that reverence and for that like reflection and real meaningful connection to nature in a way that we don't really get in urban areas anymore. So short answer is yes, I would love to do more with that. And I'd love to follow up after as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll echo Bob. I think Boston is lucky to have you, Kate. And I also think that I know that Tom would love to be in touch with you.
Well, thank you all so much. If you put in a question that we didn't have time to respond to, please email us at info@emeraldnecklace.org. We always welcome and love hearing from you. I want to give another round of applause to our speakers. Tom Green in absentia, Karen Mauney-Brodek, Kate England, Bob Delhome, and Kate Jacintho. And thank you all so much for your support and for coming tonight, getting educated, asking really great questions and helping educate us. And a shout out to everybody who made it possible for you to attend today. Kate, your remark is not lost on me as someone whose husband is watching my two children, so I could be quiet. So it takes a village to tend the Muddy River, but also to come together to talk about the Muddy River. Thank you so much. And we're done. We'll see you in the parks.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Very impressive.
Thank you to the presenters and everyone.
We'll be back in touch when the Muddy River restoration is complete and the champagne is chilled.